Everyone, start again. Hi, everyone. I am Maribel Rivera, and this is Eye on ESI. It's brought to you by True Staffing Partners and ACEDS, and I am so excited to be joined today once again, because he wasn't with us last month, by Jared Coseglia from True Staffing Partners, the CEO, and of course, Mike Quartararo, president of ACEDS. Hey, Mike. Hey,
Hi,
Jared.
everyone.
Hey guys, glad to be with everybody. Happy August. Happy
August. We missed you last month, but Sarah and Annette did a great job. So thank you for lending us them for Eye on ESI.
I heard and I saw, and I expect nothing less. And I'm glad that's been echoed back from the community. Thank you. They are not substitutes, but their own wonderful breed of true.
It was really awesome to have them with us. So before we get started, we're going to jump into, if you've never been to Eye on ESI, and we've been doing this for over a year now, a year and a half. If you haven't been to Eye on ESI, this is not just about Mike and Jared and I talking at each other and letting you listen in. We want to hear from you. We want your comments. We want your feedback. We want you to engage in the conversation with us. So please, please make sure that you're dropping questions in the chat. We are monitoring it. We're engaging with it as well. And we will ask those questions as we go along. But let's get started. We've got some stats that Jared wants to go through for us.
Yeah, so it's been a really exciting couple of months, and it's great to be back with everyone. And this first stat, I think, is the most dramatic. We've seen 75% of job seekers are accepting their first offer. That's a drop from nearly 92% the last time we reported on this coming out of the second quarter. That means, A, people are getting multiple offers again. They're not just getting one offer, right? Because they're not necessarily taking the first one. And people are now weighing multiple offers against each other. So the candidates are starting to be able to have more choices, which indicates there are more jobs, and our experience is that's exactly what's happening. We've seen more jobs flood the market in June and July than probably the entire second quarter. So it's definitely been a busier season. Candidates are having more options. Getting that offer first still has a big impact because they're still likely to take it. But that number was down to 55% at the peak of the pandemic in Q2 of 2022. So this is an interesting metric that we started tracking over the last few months that I thought everyone would be interested to see such a dramatic drop in the last few months. The second is, yeah.
Are you seeing, oh, here it goes. Never mind.
So no one's getting counter offers though. That's what's interesting, is there's still not a real desire to retain people the way that there was in 21 and 22, where like everyone was getting counter offers. It was one of like 4 or 5 offers they were getting. The job market was hotter than it's ever been. There's still a sense of, if you want to go, go. And I think part of that is also people are still leaving because of in-office policies, which we'll talk about later. And that's a big motive. It's still the #1 motivator of why e-discovery professionals are changing jobs. It's for either a switch in what the rules were of their flexibility or a desire to move to different ones. That is still the #1 thing driving people in the marketplace. 18% of true contractors have asked and accepted conversions into full-time roles. Now, why is this so important? Because for nearly 6 months, no one was getting offers to convert into a full-time employee. And this big uptick over the last couple of months tells us that people are getting full-time headcount again. Companies are able to now invest in full-time professionals in e-discovery, and they are doing it first with the people that have been there on contract that they want to retain. And we're also seeing an uptick in just the general amount of full-time headcount people are willing to spend money on. So this is a very good sign for the health of our economy in our microcosm of e-discovery, but I think is reflective of the larger whole. Job report was down in July, but we expect it to stay pretty steady, hovering around the 200,000s on a national level for a little while. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of those people that are contractors are going to be part of that bundle of people that become full-time employees on payroll. And lastly, this stat hasn't changed. People that are job seeking, that are considering jobs where they come into an office where they currently are not, they want 25% increases in what they're making to cover the costs. And those are, pretty similar no matter what the geography. Sometimes in New York and San Francisco, you could see people asking for more, sometimes 30, 32% increases just to cover the commute costs, the childcare costs, the adjustment to lifestyle, to coming back into office. Now, what I think is really interesting is no one's getting 25 to 32% raises if they're working for an employer that is now changing the policy that requires them to come into an office. And I haven't heard of any employers that are giving those kinds of bumps to people for that reason. So what you're going to see, because candidates can get it, is people are going to start really seriously considering more opportunities when they come up that are remote versus staying the course and not, recalibrating financially for a recalibration in lifestyle.
Quick question for you from our attendees. Could that 0% mean a lot of companies might love their employees, but budget-wise, they are still trying to do more with less?
100%. And that may be the reason in its entirety. I think part of it is also, it's a lot harder to fire people than if they quit, just on a human level. And so if people quit and the mandate is, hey, at some point this year, you're going to have to make choices to get your human capital budget down to X, some hiring managers, particularly in corporations, may be waiting to see what the attrition looks like between point A and point B to decide, I don't need to fire anybody. I had a few people leave, and so I'm okay, or I only need to fire one. So yeah, that's definitely factoring into the equation. And I can also tell you that we're not seeing the headcount turn on as fast in corporate as we are in law firms and service providers.
So Mike brings up a point here that I just want to talk about. Or Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna, what are your thoughts on my comment? My alternate explanation.
Mike says that managers prefer loyalty, so that's why they won't offer a counter offer.
They do until they don't. And, I have this saying that you can hold a gun to your boss's head once, but you should assume that the 6 months after you do that, that the candidate is either going to leave anyway, or that you're going to be, they're going to be looking to replace you because they expect that you'll leave anyway in the next 6 to 24 months. And the statistics from the Bureau of Labor on a national level hover between 88 and like 96% of people leave the job that they took a counter offer at within 12 months. Like, that's a huge percentage, right? Whether they're fired or quit or whatever. They're no longer in that job after they've taken a counteroffer. So, I guide all of my customers and the candidates we represent. You should never consider a counteroffer. And when we pre-screen people for consideration for representation with my organization, we ask them on the initial interview, would you consider a counteroffer? And if the answer is yes, or if the answer is a hesitant no, our guidance is always, have you thought about asking for a raise? Have you considered asking for a promotion? Have you done those things that have exacerbated all possibilities of you getting the things you want where you're at if you really want to stay there? Because the last thing I want is to put my customers or a candidate through an entire process only for that offer to be used as leverage for a counter. It's a huge waste of everyone's time. And also, it takes a lot more courage to go ask for a raise and a promotion than it does to, go look for a job. So have the courage to do that. If you really love your employer, it will generally be rewarded at least with consideration and hopefully kindness, because it's an opportunity for an employer, like you said, Mike, to recognize loyalty, right? When someone asks for a raise, like that says to you, I want to stay, I need more, like how do I, and even if you can't do it, you as a manager start looking for ways to give that person other means of mobility, if not financial and vertical, or other horizontal growth pathways that will make them feel more holistic about their job until the money can come, right?
Would you hazard a guess, Jared, at how many people either seek or interview for another job with the only motivation being to get that counteroffer? You follow what I'm saying?
Well, 0% if you work with my organization, because we
No, I'm saying generally, would you hazard a guess?
Honestly, I think the answer is not many. I would hasten to say like less than 10% of people ever wind up taking the counteroffer anyway, even at like the peak of the pandemic when, we were frustrated that was happening a lot. It was abnormal compared to what the last, 13 years before that were. In the business. So I would say less than 10% wind up taking it. Maybe even less.
And I would say if you find it difficult to have that conversation with your employer, with your manager,
Yeah.
you should not be there.
Good.
You should not be in that organization if that's the kind of conversation I mean, for me, I think you should have regular conversations on, this is my career path, this is where I want to be, how do we reach those goals? And if you're not having those regular conversations, or if they're not bringing it up and saying, hey, you know, we should have a talk about where you want to be or what you want, then something's going on in that relationship, like any relationship.
I think you have to really define what regular is, Maribel, though, because that's the problem I have with that word is what is regular?
Or maybe it's it should not be once a year.
It should be at least quarterly. It should be at least quarterly.
I think quarterly is appropriate and a good expectation for people to have, because the other thing you have to consider is, and I find this particularly in early career professionals, is they crave a lot more attention and they crave a lot more feedback. And so regular to them might mean like every week. Regular to them might mean once a month. And as a manager, you know, I need more time between those moments with the employee to be able to assess their performance and then really internalize and then externalize the feedback in a way that will be productive for everybody. And, you know, the expectation of having those on weekly or monthly basis might not be productive.
But then that comes back to when you onboard somebody, you should set those expectations and kind of say, this is when we can, you know, this is when we should check in. I don't need to check on you on a daily or weekly basis to know where you want to be or how it's going, but I need to know where you are as far as your projects. There's a difference, right? But I think, you know, as far as your career path, that again, you should set those expectations when you're onboarding somebody into your organization every time.
Hopefully.
And for managers on the call today, I think that managers should go out of their way to get feedback from other than the employee. Who are they working with? Who are they interacting with? Those kind of things. That all factors into that conversation. So when an employee does, and frankly, now that I think about it, we should do an entire session on how to ask for a raise. But that's another day. Because most people don't. They feel uncomfortable. They're hesitant. They're scared. They're afraid. Whatever. But it shouldn't be. You should be asking for what you're worth. And if there's some reason you're not worth that, trust me, a manager, a good manager will tell you.
It's so tough, Mike, because what an employee thinks they're worth versus how their skill set might measure up against others with similar years of experience and skill set in the marketplace are often vastly different. And a lot of what we spend our time doing is calibrating everyone so that matches can actually be made. And that's not just on money. That's on things like working from home and how many days a week, right? Like, as I say to my staff, literally on a daily basis, we're up against these challenges that we've literally never faced before as a working species. This idea that now it is normalized to be expected to have flexibility to work from home, and everyone's policies are different and constantly changing. And how do we as job seekers and hiring managers start to mitigate all of that in a way that's productive and also builds culture, not eradicates it? I mean, now we're getting into some really heady things, and I know we only have 15 minutes left. But yeah, I mean, like, this is a real conundrum for us all to try to crystallize. And I'll skip to the end of this long rant, which is at the core of this is our humanity of wanting to actually connect with other human beings. And I think that the thinking with corporate or law firm America hiring decision makers is that will happen, which will benefit the work product in an office better and more often than it will working remotely. And I personally do not subscribe to that assumption. I think there's lots of shades of gray in between. I think lots of people are exploring that. And I would love to do a webinar about creating a remote culture and finding the human connection, you know, because that to me is the real topic for us all to try to unpack and then find solutions for. And, you know, I have a very interesting perspective on this because I opened in 2010 and we've been fully remote since then. So we had a decade of figuring out how to do it, never coming into an office, only having semi-annual moments of human impact with our internal stakeholders and members of the true family, and how to make that work. And so there's a lot of room, I think, here for companies to find unique ways to attract talent that are non-monetary for the first time ever.
Excellent. So there is a question in the chat, but I'm going to hold that because we actually have answers to some of that. So let's keep going.
So I'll zip through this really quickly. You can see that the timeline for executives is extended. That's because there's fewer and fewer jobs for people making north of $200,000, $250,000 a year base compensation. So those searches are taking longer. There's more people to choose from. There's fewer of those searches. We expect that this will begin to go the other direction into Q3 and Q4. We think there will be a lot more executive position in Q4 and Q1 and 2 of next year as we get through this year of recalibration against market trends. You'll see, however, though, the middle of the market has sped up. Go back. The middle of the market has sped up. We went from 45 to 35 days. So if you're a PM, an analyst, a forensic examiner, a sales, not a sales professional, a sales engineer, or a solutions architect, anybody in that middle band of the market generally is making somewhere between 75 and 150, maybe $175,000 a year on the high end. Those searches are happening in 35 days again. So like we're picking up the pace. Why is the pace picking up? There's more jobs available. People are moving quicker. Candidates are getting multiple offers, which is creating pressure for them to make decisions faster. That whole middle market is speeding up. That's where the bulk of the jobs are right now. For contractors, it's gotten a little longer. Why? I think this plays into the conversion data, which is essentially telling us people are thinking about full-time hiring. And also there's more competition for contractors because despite there being more full-time jobs, there's actually even more contract jobs still over the last couple of months heading into the end of Q3. So this is a little bit of a change for us to see trending on. We added Q3 here for the first time. Next. Nothing here has really changed except for we're seeing the Midwest moving up in the PM category in order to compete with the rest of the country. And we're seeing director and manager, few and scarce though they are, also move up to compete with the rest of the country.
Are you seeing more individuals being hired in the Midwest as well?
We are. We're seeing a lot of work starting to pop up in Philadelphia, Ohio, Indiana, Texas, Nebraska. We've been doing a lot of work. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities there. And a lot of those Midwestern companies are more of a remote culture than the coastal cities. And so it gives them an opportunity to go and grab talent, you know, and offer them something that maybe they wouldn't get in the big, you know, at a big city.
Excellent.
Service providers, not a lot has changed. I think we had one adjustment here, maybe not even one. I don't think we had any adjustments here. It's more or less the same. The service providers are holding the line. The one thing we have seen is that PMs, you know, we have senior PM team lead up to 175. I think those 175s were anomalies in the first and second quarter, but we've seen a lot of project managers getting hired at 150, 155 at some of the larger vendors, which is becoming normalized. So that market is ticking up for senior PMs. And part of it is because they're trying to pull people out of law firms and they're going to need to raise that money in order to compete for those individuals.
And just for my self-serving purposes, how many of those have a certification from ACEDS or certifications in general?
I would say most of them have some kind of certification. Yes. I'd have to go back and look how many of them are ACEDS, specifically that are in that bracket, that salary bracket. But a lot of them will have technology certifications.
Excellent.
So in-office requirements, this is new data that we'll go over. Now, understand this data has come from jobs we've received in the last 2 months. We just did the last 2 months and what those customers are saying the requirement is. It may not be the policy, it may not be the reality, but when they come to us, they're saying this is what we were trying to hire for. So for law firms, only 10% or 4 days a week, we think that number will go up. 3 days a week or 3 days a week is going to be the biggest pot, right? Most people are 3 days, a lot are 2 days or less. But the 2 days is, you know, becoming a little more rare from a, I want to hire this person. Now, I can tell you that as law firms get sterner with a 3-day requirement, their candidate pool lessens. And the statistic we've been giving everybody, which still remains true, if you move from that blue, that dark blue, I'm sorry, that light blue at 75% into that dark blue 15%, your candidate pool does the opposite, right? So like 3 days a week in an office, you're going to get this part of the pie. 2 days, it goes like this. and you get a lot more pie. Fully remote, you get the whole pie. You could look at everybody. So it's something to think about in terms of strategy, especially on we need to hire quickly because we've got attrition. You're going to see the more your in-office requirement lessens, the faster your search will go. Government, they want you in.
Who doesn't like pie?
Yeah, who doesn't like pie? Government, they want you in. We can go to the next slide. So vendors are really interesting. They're almost a 180 here, with 85% being fully remote. Most of the vendors have gone fully remote. Some of them will provide office space if you want it. 10% of them have a 2-day requirement, and we see less than 5% have 3 days or more. So really, it's a vendor's remote culture. Corporations, very different. 4 days a week or more is still about 60% of this pie. 3 days is at 25%, and 2 days or less is at 15%. Here's what I would say about corporations. Only 5% of the market are corporate jobs. So this data doesn't have the volume of data that the vendors and law firms and government jobs do. Why? It's always been that way, generally speaking. Corporate in-house e-discovery departments just are not as voluminous in terms of human capital as the vendors and law firms and government agencies that they work with or are supported by. And also, corporations are the last to get their budget turned on. So a lot of them are still in a stasis, can't hire mode, and the rest are turning on the lights much faster and in greater volumes. And then I think, is that it? And then we've got our usual data here. Nothing new to really see, except contract staffing went up in Q3 just in terms of volume, but so did full-time hiring. The volume has gone up in everything. We still see 96% of jobs are hybrid or remote. And that's kind of it. I want to leave some time for questions and any other rhetoric we want to dive into with our last 10 minutes.
Yeah, so I think we wanted to chat a little bit, right? And one of the reasons you started to track that in-office remote hybrid was because we saw a recent article in one of the legal media outlets that law firms, several law firms will be requiring 4 or 5 days in the office beginning September, which is one of the questions that we saw. Similar question that we saw, how could it hurt morale for the others? But I just want to make sure that we know we're tracking this. So by October, we should start to see what does that look like, right? And you can provide some differentiation there. So I don't know, any thoughts on that from you or Mike?
Yeah, I think those metrics for me, when I read that article, were more about attorneys. And I think that in general, the firms care more about trying to force their attorneys to come back into an office. And I think a lot of that comes from we need you to train up the young bucks kind of mentality and attitude. And back to what I said earlier, like, we're going to best do that if we're physically in a space together. I don't know if it will have the same ripple effect on the e-discovery non-practicing attorney marketplace, which is generally what this data is. So we'll see. I think customers of mine know that if they've got a 4-day in-office requirement and you see 1 or 2 good candidates, you better pick one and hire one, because you're not going to see 10. People are not having it, not in the middle of this market.
Yeah,
it will be very difficult for them to hire.
and I think that's right. I'm privileged to have opportunities to talk to people all across the spectrum. And as part of our preparation for this, I've been talking to some partners at law firms, and one of the clear messages I'm hearing is that with respect to lawyers, remote lawyers are not learning. Like, look, you go to law school, you pass the bar, you become a lawyer, and then you work from home. You're not going to be as skilled as the lawyer who's in the office 4 days a week. It's just, that's how they're looking at it. And if you read between the lines, they're even basing comp on it. It's a different world for lawyers. And so that's just something to be aware of.
How do you think that's going to change? I mean, again, we're looking at a new generation coming in more and more who can do more and can learn, right? We're also looking at people who learn differently, and a lot of things you have to learn on the job. And we've heard, right, a lot of lawyers go into law firms and they start off and they don't know anything. They're expected to know how to do certain things. So I think there is a difference between you have to be in the office and learning, and sometimes some of these lawyers come out and they're expected to do things and they don't know how.
I have two comments to that. The first is, I think the problem is actually the opposite, which is they don't know how to teach virtually, or they can't get themselves organized virtually to transfer the knowledge. Not that the knowledge can't be received. It goes both ways. And I think a lot of attorneys are struggling with, how do I indoctrinate my practice to these young associates when I'm not a Zoomer, right? I think there's that. But I also I think there's going to be some dissonance because, Mike, in our conversation, I recall this really being about the substance of the lawyering, not the billable hour. And I think what's happening is the people who are working from home that aren't those first, second, third year associates that are in that 4 to 8 year range, and they're at home working from home, they don't want to come back in because they're cranking on their hours and they can get in 2,200 hours. They can get that extra bonus.
And that's fine.
An office is going to hurt their ability to do that. So there's going to be pushback.
And
there's
that's
going to be
fine.
exceptions made.
The one thing I said, and I wasn't talking about salaries are not being based on hours in the office. Of course, you have your billable hour requirements. It's the dirty secret in the industry, right? But
It's not even that big a secret.
No, it's not. But I call it the dirty secret, right? No firm will tell you, oh, we require them to work 2,500 hours a year. But I was referring more to bonuses are impacted by number of days in the office and contact. And there's another component too, Jared, to your point. And I think is that there's an innate desire for humans to connect and communicate, and something is lost. I don't know what it is, but communication is a bit of a science, honestly. There's a process of encoding and decoding, and it goes both ways between parties and groups, and it doesn't transmit well over Zoom. And that's the piece that I think that at least some of the partners I was talking to, whether you can teach or not, I've been teaching online for more than 10 years. I was teaching online when nobody ever heard of teaching online. And it's different.
It's different. Not see, that's the real key word. It's different. It's just different. I don't think it's better or worse.
I don't think it's better or worse either, but it's different. And if you don't,
it goes both ways, right? Like you meet someone in person and you're like, oh, I made that connection. You meet other people in person, and you're like, I don't ever want to work with that person again. So it goes both ways. And I think what employers are often forgetting is there's opportunity to observe that positive and negative, and then recalibrate your staff if you need to accommodate, these people need to work remotely from home because when they get in an office together, they don't work so well. And they're really productive if I just give them that permission. Others need this. And so this idea that everyone should be treated the same as it relates to this policy is odd to me, right? Like there's such opportunity here to create a customized program for your people and your mission that will lead to unified collective success. Because if you can get everyone surrounded around a main idea that we're all working together, but not everyone has to have the exact same permissions, and there's purpose behind that, those are the companies that are going to be around in another 50 years. They're going to win because they're going to maximize human potential, and they're going to find the technology to unlock that human potential.
Hey, really quick, we're almost out of time, but I want to, this Canada question I want to address. I don't have anything. Do you have anything, Jared?
Yeah, it's just smaller there. So, like 1/10 the amount of opportunity. Maybe less.
So I just want to state, so to the communication point, Mike, I think people have different ways of learning and communicating because ACEDS is very global. True Staffing is global. We have people everywhere, but we make relationships. I make relationships all the time online and have not met people in person. And I have absolutely amazing relationships with them, talking to them via video, talking to them via email. It is, again, how are you teaching? How are people learning to communicate, right, in a new world? And some people have a hard time grasping how to change, how to learn. But also, you have to remember different people learn differently. Not everyone learns the same. And we can't teach everybody just because you have an office full of lawyers or an office full of e-discovery professionals. Not all of them are all going to learn, right, the same exact way. And you have to keep that in mind.
Let me throw in one last comment on someone's comment in the chat that I think is just interesting that no one's really talking about. the minute you bring people in 4 days a week, what's that fourth day? Is that fourth day a Friday? And then is anyone going to work that day? I mean, I just wonder, right? If they've gone to work Monday through Thursday, and then you're like, oh, you can work from home Friday. How many people are gone? Like, have really checked out? And are you actually losing a whole day of unified company productivity because you burnt people out by making them commute in for 4 days?
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right. Any last words, Jared?
I really appreciate everybody attending. Stay cool out there in the summer. We'll see you again in September, and come with your hot burning questions. We're ready to answer them.
Yes, we are. Mike?
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Always a lively conversation.
So we will be back in September, but until then, if you're going to be at ILTACon, Mike and I will be there. We're at booth 1912, I believe. So come by, visit us, or let us know if you're going to be there and like to meet in person. Or the next time, I think Jared, myself, and Mike will all be together in person. So you get to see us in person and communicate with us in person, is at Relativity Fest in September. So we hope to see many of you there. Bye, everyone.